Ha, hi there everybody. I was just viewing my DVD for a view to a kill. Recently got it. It's absolutely cool. While watching a lot of the movies of the past, basically movies from the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s, I ended up realizing something very strange. Something that exactly got my attention just a few months back from today, and I've been kind of working on it, trying to basically explore the origins of my idea and why I think the way I think. Yes, as you may have just watched the thumbnail and read the title, this video is going to be about why modern movies are such shitholes and why they're such kind of crap. Hey there, everybody, how's it going? This is John Matthew, and you're watching CineManiacs 24/7, a channel dedicated to movies, music, physical media, books, video games, and pop culture. Yes, modern movies. The kind of travesty that the film industry these days is facing, there are many. The kind of problems that it is facing is a bad fandom, or let's say a toxic fandom. The idea that people are literally forming mobs on the internet that basically, can either completely kill a film or can completely sort of, overrate a film beyond a certain perception. That's one of the many reasons why I think the modern movie scene is a little too murky. There are lots of other problems as well, and this video is going to be a very long one, filmed in a discussion style of video where I'll be talking about many problems that I have personally noticed as a person watching movies for so many years of my life. Before we even proceed, guys, please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to all notifications so that I can come up with more and more new videos every time. So, without any further delays, without any kind of problems, before we even proceed, let me just come back in a little while and we'll get started very soon. The very first reason why I feel most modern day movies are bad is because number one, franchises. And franchises. Franchises everywhere. Be it my country here, India, or even abroad, that is in the UK or the US, people are basically trying to make franchise movies a lot. They're turning a single piece of movie that could have been untouched and a cult classic that would be revered as one of the best movies ever made in the years to come. It is completely corrupted with too many number of entries that basically kill the entire essence of the original movie. You look at the Halloween franchise, for instance. The movie started off well with the first one. The second one, okay, not exactly too good, but fine, gets the job done. The third film, horribly underrated, but still it's kind of good if you watch it after all these years. I've even done a video on that particular movie as well on my channel. Check it out here. The fourth and the fifth movies and anything beyond is basically the reason why the Halloween franchise failed, because they completely ended up retconning the entire essence of the previous movies, and they just completely killed the entire essence of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, the entire equation between them. Of course, H20 or Halloween 20 years later kind of undoes entire bullshit that the angle with Laurie Strode's daughter had to do in the 4, 5, and 6 movies. It completely starts in a different way and ends up being something different of its own. But that movie's ending was completely put to shit because of the movie called Halloween Resurrection. That kind of ended up, reversing, or let's say retconning the entire ending of Halloween 20 or H20 as you can call it. This was one franchise that completely went into shit because its sequels eventually failed to pick up the kind of momentum that the originals did. The same goes for Star Wars. You look at the first 3 movies, the original trilogy, masterpiece in cinema. Of course, one of the best movies ever made, period. The prequel trilogy kind of establishes Anakin Skywalker's journey from being the chosen one to going to the dark side and being Darth Vader. Those 3 movies, well, they are kind of underappreciated in today's time, but somehow a lot of people have realized that those 3 movies aren't exactly as bad as you think. Okay, maybe Attack of the Clones is not a very strong film, but the rest of the movies are kind of good, and especially Revenge of the Sith, the masterpiece among all the 3 movies. The same cannot be said for the sequel trilogy though, because it completely contradicts the entire essence of the Star Wars movies. Same goes for the Fast and Furious films. Too many sequels that are unnecessary and kind of dilute the essence of the original are the reason why a lot of franchises seem too forced today. I mean, where is the fifth element? Where are movies like Demolition Man? Where are movies like Minority Report? Where are films like E.T. the Extraterrestrial? We don't have single movies that are all-time blockbusters and that never have sequels. Okay, they may have video game adaptations, they may have other comic book based continuations or something. Even look at John Carpenter's movies. Most of his movies like The Thing, Christine, they've never had sequels. They're all one pieces, one single movie that's a masterpiece that is revered by people years later as well. This is my major criticism of franchises. Most of these movies are way too unnecessary and are never supposed to come out. They're not exactly supposed to be existing at the first place, but since the studios keep milking them out, that's the reason these shit movies keep coming every now and then. And that's one problem why modern movies suck. Because franchises. The second point kind of picks up from where the first point ended. Yes, the studios. These stupid ass people who kind of run big companies that apparently are, in the business for more than 50 to 60 years, they've kind of made a monopoly for the industry. Look at Disney. I cannot imagine Walt Disney's company, which apparently created classics 50 to 60 years ago, they're struggling to basically make good movies today. Now, I don't say or count Disney Plus web series or all those online series for the record. I'm only counting theatrical releases here. You look at any of their modern day movies, they've all exactly changed a lot of tone. Those movies, the tone they have, the kind of message that they're propagating, which I'll come into the next points, they are actually kind of killing the entire essence of the image that Disney has built for itself over the years. Yes, a lot of these movie studios are run by people who may or may not know a thing about art. You look at Kathleen Kennedy, the person who basically produced Jurassic Park years ago, and fast forward a few years and she's a completely different person. The idea that she gets to say things like how Star Wars basically does not have a good comic culture or some extended culture, which is why they have to create new stories, completely forgetting the fact that there were comics, TV shows, and even cartoons basically after the prequel trilogy itself. The Ewoks, the Clone Wars, the Star Wars Rebels, and there were even comic books about the prequel trilogy as well. I ended up exploring the internet to find out more about this, and I'll definitely bring it to you in some other video. But for today, let's keep it at this. Studio executives these days are too busy trying to print numbers. Of course, I understand that movies, of course, do require a little bit of financial funding, and sometimes studios have to think about finances as well as money as well. But the entire thing becomes problematic when people focus only on the money factor and not exactly on the quality of movies. That's the reason why you see quality in the modern day movies has taken a very, very big slump. The movies have kind of gone down massively. Of course, let me talk about my country here because I've been talking a lot about American films as of now. In India here itself, the movie called RRR turned out to be a giant success. But let me tell you, that movie is shit overrated. Shit overrated. And that is something only my Indian audience is going to understand. And of course, my statements are very controversial. For those people who are fans of RRR, they'll come blast me on the internet. But you know what? Go blast me because I don't care. Because after all, we live in the time where most people are influenced by the internet mob beyond recognition. These people, just bunch of keyboard warriors that they are, they type shit on the internet, they influence people about other movies, and if you don't agree with their opinions, they cancel you out. That's the biggest crap I've heard in the last so many years. No wonder why I don't exactly, have a social media account itself, because it's just run by a bunch of mad people who have little to almost no respect to the taste of cinema people have. Studio executives in general are the biggest reason why films like The Fifth Element, The Car, or let's say a new Fast and Furious for a new generation is never made. They don't exactly make movies that are basically classics in their own way. They're only interested to print money. Imagine a movie like Titanic or Back to the Future being released today. The kind of wokeness those movies would have, the kind of bad writing those movies would have, they would be completely disgraceful. Completely disgraceful. I just cannot imagine Back to the Future being with a female Marty who is apparently, able to time travel and master everything just because she's a girl. And studio executives expect us to connect with this kind of behavior. They expect us to connect and identify with this kind of behavior. It's funny how a lot of these TV shows and movies that are held by these so-called great studio executives follow the same kind of pattern. This was my point for studio executives, and believe me, they're shitty as hell. The third big problem, according to me, is the oversaturation of the superhero genre. Believe me, 30 years back, if I was to tell you a movie like Avengers Endgame is going to come out and completely rock the box office, you wouldn't believe that kind of stuff, because the superhero genre in the 80s and the 90s was in a very rudimentary form. With the only exceptions of movies like Richard Donner's Superman, none of the films, at least at that point of time, would have worked that well. Okay, 1989's Batman, directed by Tim Burton, was a step ahead, of course, and it also was a little ahead in terms of, the kind of quality that Batman generally has. Also, its sequel, 1992's Batman Returns, which is of course one of my favorite superhero movies and kind of the first superhero movie that I actually saw. Kind of the first, because the first one technically would be Spider-Man to me. I even own the VCD to that movie here. It's a video CD, very old, the quality isn't exactly anything exceptional, but since it's my favorite movie, I've just got to buy and keep it with me. Anyway, the superhero genre in the modern day context is absolutely oversaturated. I mean, I cannot imagine 3 to 4 superhero movies coming every year in the intervals of like 2, 3 months, 4 months, something. Thor Love and Thunder is gone. We have some other movie to cope up with. There's some other movie gone. There's some other movie to cope up with. The entire idea of superhero sludge throwing in every now and then, especially after, the MCU has kind of peaked with Endgame, the interest, or let's say the entire audience retention graph for Marvel has been very, very bad. Look at the kind of crappy TV shows and movies they've designed post Endgame. And I personally never liked the MCU a lot. I'll tell you why. Because the MCU has a key problem. A problem being that their movies have too much CGI and their movies are not serious at all. I mean, I can never relate anything with the MCU movies. Never. I just don't understand the entire premise of the MCU. Okay, you are a Captain America fan. Go and read the comics. Go watch the TV shows. The cartoon shows, of course. They are far more comprehensive and far more respectful other than the portrayal of the movies, which is basically always a child's thing. These movies are kind of created for people that are only 13 to 14 years of age. And it's funny how people in my generation, even aged 28 and 30, are kind of enjoying these movies. You know, X-Men franchise for this record has been a little better. And even the Dark Knight movies. I've never watched the Dark Knight movies yet, but the movie that I saw in the trilogy, the Nolan trilogy, of course, was, I guess, The Dark Knight Rises. Okay, that movie is a little flawed and at times very frustrating because there are too many plot holes. They've kind of tried to cover up the entire Nolan saga in some way. But still, believe me, Nolan's Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, James Mangold's Logan, they are the only movies, with of course a little bit of addition from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. They are the only superhero movies that have kind of stuck very well with me. And believe me, these movies are far better than the superhero sludge that the MCU has been making for such a long while now. Most of their movies these days have become the basic reason why other movies in the entire Hollywood don't just come out anymore. Imagine, why doesn't our generation have The Fifth Element? Why doesn't our generation have something of a new Fast and Furious movie? Something new in the car genre itself. Why don't we kind of have movies like Minority Report? Why don't we have movies like AI, Artificial Intelligence? Why don't we have films like 2001 A Space Odyssey? Why don't we have movies, maybe, just for instance, why don't we have a good James Bond movie? Daniel Craig's James Bond doesn't sit well with me, that's my personal opinion here. Why don't we ever get to see anything new? Anything very, very groundbreaking, something original that is just a one movie? Why don't we get to see movies like The Godfather? Why don't we get to see classics such as Goodfellas? Just imagine. Nolan and Tarantino's concerns about how the superhero genre is kind of changing the entire dynamic for cinema is not wrong. Personally, I'm a person who's kind of agreed to their stance of claiming that the superhero movies aren't exactly as, cool as people think they are, because these movies are kind of shallow. They are exactly predictable, at times, completely frustrating given the idea that they use too much CGI to fill up their scenes. Of course, Logan also had CGI, but the kind of CGI that Logan had, and if you compare it with Avengers Endgame, you'll get to know what the difference is. Most of the cool superhero films, at least the ones that had some character development and story development, they are overshadowed and they have earned far less at the box office compared to the superhero movies from MCU. I'm not an MCU hater here, but I personally feel the MCU has completely super saturated or oversaturated the superhero genre. And the oversaturation of the superhero genre is the basic reason why modern movies suck so bad. Because these films, the sludge just keeps coming every now and then. There's not a fresh breath of air for this entire genre. And I would not shy away from saying the fact that the superhero genre is practically on the verge of its death. Practically on the verge of its death. 30 years ago the scene was different. But ever since Hugh Jackman's X-Men basically changed the entire superhero genre and made people believe that, okay, superhero films can also be bankable box office property. Studios and Kevin Feige, of course, the head of Marvel Studios, he's basically, churned out and completely turned the Marvel franchise into crap. I would tell you one thing: Kevin Feige's best days, or the entire heyday that he was in, back with the movies like Spider-Man or Fantastic Four or 2003's Hulk, they were different times for him. But today, he isn't half the person that he was to be 20 years ago, because his studio has turned out movies, or let's say the MCU, entirely into a factory line. Entirely a factory line. Just imagine, they announced in the Comic Cons that a lot of their movies are going to come out in the year 2026 and 27. They have planned movies that aren't even filmed yet, that aren't even finalized yet, and they've already planned these movies, basically going to, you know, show us a slate of movies that will come in the next few years. Isn't that factory filmmaking? Of course, that's the dictionary definition of factory filmmaking. Because when studios tell you that these are the kind of movies you're going to put out in the next few years and you've got to watch them, that is factory filmmaking. The entire idea that the same kind of product is just made a little different than the previous one and it is sold to you in the same face as the last one, that is factory filmmaking, my friends. That is factory filmmaking. And this is one of the prime reasons why I believe the oversaturation of the superhero genre has completely killed modern cinema down to the core. Another reason why I feel most of the modern day movies don't kind of work well with me is because bad camera work and bad lighting techniques. Believe me, whenever I watch movies like The Fifth Element or Star Wars or a Toy Story movie from the 90s, I can clearly tell out the tonality and the color palette differences between those movies. Those movies are inherently always either bright or one color was always predominantly present in the movie. For example, let's look at the film The Fifth Element. The Fifth Element had orange color basically as the most vibrant and the most visible color on screen. You look at movies like The Matrix, green color was the most associated color in that entire film. The film had this strange green kind of tint that made it look very, very distinct from most of the movies of its own contemporary time. But fast forward 10 to 20 years later, you don't see that kind of movies being made anymore. Half the modern day movies that I've seen, they've always got this strange kind of, gray and brown kind of color tint that doesn't sit well with me. They are all cinematically and colorfully bland. Personally, believe me, they're all bland. I don't exactly understand the idea why most modern day movies have lost too much color. Of course, now, I wouldn't say that 2000s movies didn't have the same problem as this, because a lot of the films actually back then used to have a same kind of color tint, that same gold color tint that basically used to dominate the movies of the 2000s. You look at the Fast and the Furious, you look at movies like Terminator 3, you can kind of feel some resemblance to the color tone, but of course, it is not too much. It is a little, of course, not too much. They're still distinctive movies in terms of tone and the setting. And the color tint might be matching here and there, but the entire tint is totally different. You look at Tokyo Drift. Tokyo Drift had a far more serious tone than any of the other movies in the entries, or let's say any of the other entries in the franchise that would come eventually after Tokyo Drift. A lot of the modern day movies to me seem colorfully and cinematically bland. The camera work on them, okay, barring a few movies here and there, the camera work on most of the movies is crappy. I kind of understand the idea with the examples of the shaky cameras, mostly in the action scenes, where they basically have this camera shaking violently for no apparent reason, and we cannot even look at the face of the actor who's supposed to be there. The bad ideas behind writing those movies, sometimes even shady camera work that doesn't fit well, overuse of special effects, let's say even computer generated effects, overuse of maybe CGI at times to fill in the gaps, of course. And apart from that, special effects in most of the cases these days is not working too well with me. I mean, where is that one movie which does not have special effects? I mean, I don't get to see a modern day movie like The Godfather. We don't get to see crime dramas anymore. We don't get to see serious, intense movies like that. We don't even get to see films like When Harry Met Sally anymore. Just imagine. The romantic comedy genre and many other genres are practically extinct in the modern day time, because the people that were investing in those movies, they've either completely changed their outlook in order to survive the industry, or let's say the wrath of the industry, or most of these people have either gone on to just, kind of desert filmmaking and get into something else. I don't understand why films like Harry Met Sally or even movies like The Terminator don't just get made anymore. I mean, I'm not saying a sequel to The Terminator. I'm talking about something original, some new kind of neo-noir movie, some new sci-fi movie, some new killer robot based movie. If you get what I'm saying. The entire problem with the bad camera work and the entire bad lighting schemes is that people just don't make movies with that kind of interest anymore. Believe me, I can practically name you 10 movies which look all the same. MCU movies, for instance, practically every single movie looks the same. Every single film. You know, X-Men The Last Stand, apparently considered to be the worst X-Men movie and also one of the worst superhero films ever made. That film was thematically and tonally much more different than its predecessors. Of course, in a bad way mostly, but still, the difference between tonalities and color palettes was very, very noticeable in that film. Of course, that movie is kind of like a 50-50 to me. Not exactly a very good one, but not exactly a bad one as well. I still believe that most modern day movies need to have a lot of work on the camera and the lighting as well, because I'm fed up of this gray and black and white kind of lighting that does not you know kind of illicit, or let's say doesn't kind of give you that psychological reaction of seeing the color of a movie. I mean, we don't have movies like The Matrix anymore. We don't have colorful movies these days. All the movies look too bland and too plain and too boring at times. That's my criticism again. If there's anybody not agreeing with me, please tell me in the comment section. I have no problem with that. With that, I wrap up the point about bad camera work. Now, this point is basically about wokeness and political propaganda in movies. Believe me, Sigourney Weaver, Linda Hamilton, Mala Jovovich, these were females, or let's say actresses, that starred in roles that basically gave them the image of the strong character. But do you know why these characters are much more loved than most modern day female characters? There's a simple reason to it. These characters were never exactly driven by hatred or anger or any kind of resentment towards the opposite gender. They were people who were subjected to circumstances that no normal person would ever be. And that's the reason their reactions or their behavior towards those things turned out to be very, very different. You look at Sarah Connor. She was a very, very naive woman in the first Terminator movie, but by the time of the second film, she turns into this badass. And there is a part where she gets freaked out when she looks at Arnold's character, there is a T-800, but throughout the film, she ends up making an alliance with him. And in the deleted scenes of that movie, there is a lot of stuff which you can see, which kind of establishes her arc from being scared of the T-800 because of the prior encounter or previous encounters they had in the first Terminator movie, to the ending of Terminator 2, where she kind of thanks T-800 for saving John Connor's life, and there's a scene of honor between the two. That is how you write a strong character. And the idea that most people are too busy including diversity in movies, well, we don't need that. Personally, a guy who is interested in films and filmmaking in general, let me tell you one simple thing. It just depends purely on the script. It is not that people of ethnic backgrounds, or let's say ethnic colors, or people just from different backgrounds have not exactly existed in Hollywood. That's a very big lie. People like Keith David, Samuel L. Jackson, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, they've all been part of the industry for as long as you can remember. You look at Keith David, he's been a staple of all John Carpenter films, and his voice and the sheer presence in the movie The Thing was one of the many reasons why I ended up liking that movie. So it's not to say that Hollywood does not have any kind of representation. It just purely depends on script. If the script demands my lead character to be an Afro-American, so be it. But when you shoehorn in a type of character that is not supposed to be a part there, that's where it all goes murky. This is the thing that most modern day audience doesn't want to understand. And this is the reason why Grace's character from Terminator Dark Fate, the entire Charlie's Angels movie which came out in 2019, considering the complete fucking mess that it was, and also the Rey Skywalker character, which is apparently one of the shittiest characters written by modern day movie audience, or let's say modern day movie writers, that kind of explains to you why modern day characters are so bland, because they're always too busy trying to add diversity. We don't need to see that. We just need good characters, and it doesn't matter what the gender of the character is. It's always about how good they are and how can we connect with them. Why don't we write characters that are basically just strong, very, very cool and very, very likable, but they happen to be girls, but they happen to be men? Why don't we have movies where guys and girls kind of work together, set aside their differences, and work for greater good? Of course, what I'm saying is not going to enter the heads of most of the Hollywood executives and fanboys of most modern day movies. But what they don't understand is that this is the reason why most modern day movies are crap. And look at the reasons why films like Charlie's Angels or Terminator Dark Fate or movies like the sequel trilogy are so bad. Of course, don't let the box office numbers of the sequel trilogy fool you. That movie or that entire trilogy is just a pile of big bullshit. It's a big pile of bullshit. All the character development or well, was there any character development? There was no character development in the sequel trilogy. Trust me, that movies or that entire series of movies was just a bunch of crap movies being produced by crap people. Trust me, this ends the point of wokeness in Hollywood cinema and in general world cinema. People just don't want to understand that characters are not defined by ethnicity, but by their conflict, by their arcs, and by their likability. Sometimes we can have characters that happen to be female and are strong and badass at the same time. Sometimes we can have men who are vulnerable, who turn out to be strong in the end, and have a let's say, very, noticeable and very beautifully written character arcs. Yes, that ends the point here. Another reason why I feel modern day movies are kind of going bad is slumping physical media sales. I've been a physical media fan for all my life. I've been collecting DVDs and even VCDs for a very long time now. As a person who's been kind of collecting DVDs and physical media for a very long time, I'll tell you something. When I went to the internet and found out about movies like Titanic and The Fifth Element and many other films, I understood that physical media business was actually a very powerful method to, kind of add a lot of more cash and money, or let's say the dollars, for making a movie more successful. If you wouldn't believe me, this is a true fact, but Titanic ended up generating 500 to 600 million dollars of revenue only through video cassettes. Yes, only through video cassettes. The idea that physical media sales was actually the prime redeemer, or let's say DVD sales were the prime redeemer of movies that kind of fail to make it too big at the box office, and they end up giving them an additional 50 to 100 or 150 million dollars of worth to the box office gross, which kind of adds a little bit more to the earning of the movie. This is the biggest reason why I feel that modern day movies are kind of bad, because too much focus on streaming that kind of kills off the entire movie watching experience, and that kills off the overall quality of the movies in general, is the reason why physical media sales are sort of going down. People just don't understand the idea that something that you don't own and you're paying for it every month is not exactly yours. You don't own any of your movies or TV shows or any of the stuff that you watch online. It is just there on a contractual basis. The minute the contracts are over, your TV shows and movies are going to disappear, and you wouldn't even know this. Just look at the entire bunch of Power Ranger TV shows that were completely removed from Netflix. You won't find any more Power Rangers on Netflix anymore. Yes, you won't find a single season of Power Rangers from the post Mighty Morphin era anymore. Of course, a lot of that only exists on YouTube, but the quality for them, abyssal quality. But anybody who loves Power Rangers can definitely give it a look. Since I love Power Rangers, I go and watch them again and again, but it doesn't exist on Netflix. And the DVD sets to Power Rangers, holy shit, they are some of the most expensive DVDs out there to buy today. Shrink wrapped, brand new Power Rangers DVD box sets that were created by Shout Factory back in 2013. And a lot of them are out of print now, with the only exceptions of the Mighty Morphin box set that is available here in UK in Regions 2. The rest of the Power Ranger box sets are just not available. They're all out of print, and even the ones that are available in pre-owned condition, you won't imagine the kind of money you would have to pay to buy them. That's the reason why I believe that slumping physical media sales is a huge problem for movies, because it not only kind of affects their box office gross, but it also completely kills off the entire idea of movie restoration and preservation. Imagine if I was to maintain this DVD for a view to a kill, this would last with me for the next 30 years. And if in case I still find the DVD to this movie 30 years ahead as well, I can preserve this movie for me every time. I just had to pay once for this movie, and I own this. I can watch it anytime I want to. I just need to maintain it that well. And that kind of explains the idea why physical media is always a little too superior than streaming, or let's say watching movies online. This is my point or my theory about why physical media sales have sort of slumped, and the slumping has affected modern day movies in their quality in general. This was a pretty long video. I know, even I feel very exhausted filming this, but this is the longest and the most, detailed kind of discussion video that I've created on this channel. More and more of this kind of content is going to come this year. I'm also going to do a lot of video game reviews, a lot of movie reactions, a lot of other discussions on other topics as well. I'm also going to get into the casual DVD reviews as well every time that I keep doing them. There is a lot more new stuff coming to the channel. Thank you so much for all the people who have watched the video up until this point. Please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon for notifications, because it gives me a lot of help when you do so. I, John Matthew, would now like to resign and go back to my real world and watch some movie maybe. Tell me down in the comments section about what movie are you going to watch today. I'm definitely going to watch maybe Star Wars Episode 2 today, just trying to, prepare for a video that's going to come in the future someday. Till that time, guys, bye-bye, take care, stay safe, keep buying movies on physical media. That's the best way you can preserve movies. And also, don't get frustrated with modern day movies. I have some problems and apprehensions with modern day films, but there are good things about them as well. But the problem is that the bad has kind of overshadowed the good in very, very pathetic ways. And that's the reason why most modern day movies suck so bad. Well, keep watching your kind of movies that you like the most, and after all, that's what unites us film fans, isn't it? The kind of films we love, the kind of films we want to watch, we must keep watching them and doing them. Alright? Take care, guys, stay safe, bye bye, and Godspeed.